Welcome, everyone, to Voices of NCAJ, the podcast for the North Carolina Advocates for Justice. I'm Amber Nimitz, your host and Director of External Affairs for NCAJ. Before we get started, I'd like to thank today's episode sponsor, Advocate Capital. Advocate is passionate about helping plaintiffs' attorneys get better results for clients, mainly through their AdvoTrack case expense funding service. It allows firms to track case expenses and recover borrowing costs, which makes the net cost of borrowing zero on cases they win. You can learn more at advocatecapital.com. I'm excited to be talking today with Ben Whitley, longtime NCAJ member who I got to know a little better when I interviewed him for a story in the upcoming edition of Trial Briefs magazine. That edition of the magazine should be landing in NCAJ member mailboxes this month and is now available online as well at ncaj.com/trialbriefs. Ben is a partner in the Whitley Law Firm, which has won hundreds of millions of dollars for plaintiffs and has expanded to serve communities across North Carolina over the past 20 years, due in large part to Ben's leadership. And a lot of our members and members of the general public know him from seeing him frequently on WRAL. We're going to talk about that and a lot more. Ben, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for being here.
Amber, it's good to be here. Appreciate the invite.
Yeah. So let's start with what's perhaps the most well-known aspect for members of the general public, how you market your firm, the Whitley Law Firm, not just on the long-running show, Attorneys on Call, but also with your Community Cares partnership with WRAL.
Right. Yeah. So it kind of goes back to my dad. I learned so much of my values as far as shaping the way that we're speaking to the public and advertising, based on what he had done as one of the real first pioneers of the lawyers on TV back in the late 80s and 90s. Lawyer advertising wasn't allowed up until the Supreme Court decision. He was part of a firm that was part in Eastern North Carolina, and they were some of the first folks to advertise. And the way that he would advertise was basically telling folks kind of what they need to know or basic information, or just kind of approaching the public as if he was speaking to a jury. And he is still a great jury trial lawyer, but he talks to the public like he's speaking to a jury. And this is kind of what we've always kind of seen as our values in our advertising, as we've carried that, as I've carried that into the future and still using those. And one of those aspects was the long-running TV show Attorneys on Call, which has always been an informational-based platform where we're not necessarily selling. We're not saying, call us if you've been in a wreck, or we get all this money for you. And it's like, no, sometimes you don't necessarily need a lawyer for a case, and maybe this is how you handle a property damage case, or here's how we handle big cases, and these are the experts that we hire. We've always tried through that show is to kind of pull the curtains back on the mysterious legal world, show the public what it is that we do and how we do it. We often would have clients come on as well, and different attorneys from different practice areas, just for the idea of continuing to provide that information to the public. My experience on what that does is that creates a trust that they can see. They can see that we know what we're doing, or they can see from our clients, but they can learn from us. And oftentimes those cases, or the way that marketing would end up, is that people were longtime watchers of the show, like grandmothers or parents, and someone would need a lawyer, and they would actually be the ones that you need to hire the Whitley Law Firm. I've been watching them for years. And so that created a signature level of trust within the community, and we've carried that same message, or that same vibe, as the kids say, through our advertising on more condensed formats. Because the Attorneys on Call show, that's a 30-minute format, and these days folks don't have a 30-minute attention span. Attention spans have gotten to like 2 minutes or even less now, like goldfish.
Right.
So there's got to be ways to continue that method of education, and this is what the legal industry does. And we're doing that now as we've transitioned more into the digital market space, and being able to have our platforms represent that same kind of level of community information, but in much quicker formats that folks are a little bit easier to digest now.
Yeah, and you said something to me during our interview for the magazine piece that authenticity was sort of the key to all of it, really. Like letting people know that, rather than having, maybe someone who looks like the perfect lawyer portraying, like
Right.
telling you I'll win you a whole bunch of money, like actually just being who you are comes through.
That was a great conversation we had about that. I think it kind of comes back to just being North Carolina is such a great state, it's such a diverse state, but yet, there's just values that North Carolinians have, and I think a lot of that's just straight talk. North Carolinians want straight talk. My dad had created a whole commercial series many years ago, and it was Straight Talk with Bob Whitley. And so it's showing up, and again, I am just taking what he did really well and finding ways to make it more accessible to the modern market now. When you're straight talk and you're showing up as you are, that is easy to do. Now, that's not what they say is easy to do in front of a camera, but that is easy to show up who you are. And I think there's choices in lawyer advertising. You can be a character,
Right.
or, well, maybe there's three choices. You can be a character, somebody that you're not. Some people can pull this off very well, some people cannot. Or you can hire an actor to be a character for you.
Mhm.
That can be effective. Or you can show up as yourself. And that's kind of the nature of how I have used myself as far as when I tape TV commercials, for example, the 30-second TV commercials. I'm looking at a camera. I do not have a script. There is no real planning on what I'm going to, necessarily want to say. There's no teleprompter. And the camera is positioned so there's some kind of mirror thing and a guy can stand and I can see somebody standing there looking at me, and he basically asked me a question. What do you need to know about a workers' compensation case? Just a very plain question. And I put myself in the belief that I'm walking down the street. I'm going to literally think to myself, all right, I'm walking down the street. Somebody has just asked me that same question, and then I'm going to explain it to them like that. Boom. So that's how I do the commercials, because then it's me being authentic, explaining to them what I think, and it's me not talking like a lawyer because it's somebody I just met. And that's how I've trained my brain to do that in a way for, like, for example, TV commercials. But again, I think that for all of the advertising lawyers, and there's lots of us, members of NCAJ, I think we all know that the landscape is changing. It's changing much quicker than we thought it would. And what I'm really mentioning is really the out-of-state lawyers that have come in from these big, large national personal injury law firms. So there's more competitors coming into the space for the advertising lawyers. These are firms that will establish North Carolina lawyers, so they're not out of state, that they've branded themselves in our state. Have you seen a lot of these competitors come up from the Alabama and Florida? So as these changes are all something us local folks are having to accept and learn to deal with in our space, I think it is even more important to remember your authenticity, your local roots, because that's the anecdote, right? That's the anecdote, is remembering and reminding people we're North Carolina lawyers, all of us here, and it's always better to have local North Carolina lawyers than it is some crazy out-of-state firm. So,
Right. And another project you're working on with WRAL is your Community Cares partnership.
right.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. So, a couple years ago, we came up with the mission statement, and it's we answer the call. We say it every Monday on our huddle, but we also, underneath we answer the call, is that we're serving our clients, we're serving ourselves as our firm, our staff. And the third part is that we serve our community. And again, another value from Bob Whitley is that he always explained to give back to the communities upon which you live and work in, and especially a community that we've become a great voice for and that have allowed us for our own success, that we've always felt the need that it has to be part of our culture to give back. And so when WRL and I created the Community Cares, it was an opportunity to highlight each month a different charity for a whole year. And each of these, so it was one charity a month, and there would be a check presentation. These are going on now. There'd be a check presentation. We would bring out the charity. We would talk about the charity. And we've always found we would try to find lesser known charities along with the ones everybody does know, but the lesser known ones would give them that airtime. And we've heard some great stories. There was this one from a blood disorder group that not a lot of people knew about. We put them on TV, and they actually found and reached out to some people that were, it was a great story, and they wrote us a letter. So it gives us the ability to give them the money, but it also gives them ability to publicize their own situation, especially for folks that didn't know. So that's been a big fun part of our community services. We also encourage all of our folks that work with us to give some time back, and they get days off to do charity work, and then of course the pro bono work. So it's a big part of our culture at the firm.
Great. And of course, marketing is just one part of being a partner in Whitley Law. You've really been instrumental in expanding the firm from where you started with you started in law school or right out of law school, right? And they sent you off from Kinston
Right.
to break into the Raleigh market, right?
Right. Yeah. And at that time, the firm was based out of Kinston, and office is still over in Eastern North Carolina, and had just opened an office, a satellite office in Raleigh. And it was one of those shared spaces where you can use a conference room, but yeah, you don't, it's not like a real office. And I remember being put up there right out of law school, and quite young, I guess we're about 26, 7, and having to really do everything in that office itself, and was always kind of surprised when people would even hire me. I was like, yeah, okay. So, but that's part of the confidence of doing that, because you could then learn and get the results and build the practice. But I would do the answering the phone and doing the intake, and then being case manager, and then even the cases that I couldn't settle with the insurance company would try them. And after that practice built a little bit, I was also put into the Social Security disability part of the firm, where I learned and did all of the Social Security disability hearings. And that was kind of where I learned more of the skills. And of course, there's nobody in the government side that's trying to tell you you're wrong. Oftentimes back then, it was like you were sometimes arguing with the judge, but you would get actual results. Sometimes they would call them on the records. And so that part of my practice, as I was growing that part in Raleigh, of being able to then work with clients that are already established, that the firm had sent me to do the hearings, and be able to get on the record opinions, and you would feel that kind of change in their arc of their life. And that was that kind of juice, or call it the energy, that has always driven me to be the fun part of this, where it's where you can watch how your work kind of change somebody's life, and that's cool.
So you got that good emotional feedback from.
You get that emotional
Uh-huh.
feedback, and that's when you realize that it's a bigger thing beyond kind of whatever else you're thinking.
And so in building the firm, you relied in part on some of the connections you made, being a member of the New Lawyers Division, and you were chair of the New Lawyers Division of NCAJ, right?
Right. Yeah, and I think that early on, Joe Tunstall and I and Stuart, we were all in that kind of class of the New Lawyers Division. It used to be called the Young Lawyers Division. And that's where, when you did to do that, then they would put you on the Board of Governors. And so then I got to meet all the legends of the bar, of the plaintiff's bar, and created relationships, and really dear relationships, of course, with Doug and Peggy Abrams, and the cases that we've worked on through the years, and being able to also have mentors in the program, and watch and learn how to build a successful trial practice. And that is really the way I feel that I have been able to be successful, is in my ability to have relationships, and to use those relationships as a way to learn more about kind of what I can potentially do. And I've done that with lawyers kind of across the country, and learning how to build these bigger firms. And I think one of the things that's been so cool about these relationships with lawyers here, even at NCAJ and in the national organizations, is that everybody wants everybody else to succeed, really, and learn from each other. Even us, that can be a little bit tough as us advertising lawyers, talking about competitors within our area. We're very competitive. But truly, we want everybody to truly succeed, because we're ultimately in this business of helping people. So it's just like, wow, it'll all tides will rise, all rising tides will rise all of our boats. I've recently really believed in the last 2 years that the collaboration is the new competition, because we can be really strong in collaborating and finding projects together, that I've done with Camp Lejeune and some of these other things. It's been very rewarding, because it's an opportunity to work with different lawyers and folks that you can work on together. So I think the future, truly, as we see more of these kind of mixed law firms coming in, there's the whole issue with the Arizona with getting, venture capital money into creating non-law firms that can be owned by businesses, and we're going to see a lot of crazy stuff in that space coming. So, but I truly think one of the other antidotes, besides being yourself and reminding people that you're North Carolina and you're local, is this idea that collaboration amongst us North Carolina lawyers or firms, some of us even being competitors, but collaborating together for one big case or one big project together could be a real way of the future.
Yeah, I've always been impressed by the camaraderie in this organization because to be a solo or small firm practitioner, you have to be very, you have to be very competitive. You have to be very driven. And so to watch a whole bunch of folks like that come together, and set aside their egos and their like need to be number one and work together for the good of the practice area or for the profession is really, it really sets this organization apart.
It does. I agree. I see it in Camp Lejeune. I see it in Poe Hall. I see it in a lot of places. So.
Mm-hmm. And you've been very supportive of NCAJ throughout your association. You've been a member for 20 plus years since you started practice, right?
Right.
And then recently you were instrumental in helping get the laws related to UIM stacking and the expansion of coverage limits changed in 2023. And, it took a lot of your time and resources that you didn't necessarily have to devote to that. Why is it important for you to stay involved in the politics?
Well, because I like to be involved where I can be effective, and I think that's the key: is where can I be effective to actually see a change. And state politics have always been interesting to me because you can in fact see a change and make real changes for lives of North Carolinians. And a group of us, it was a team effort, but a group of us decided to have a different approach to the way that we talk to legislators and the relationships that we created and had with legislatures. And we were very successful in doing so. And of course, that did require a lot of steak dinners, a lot of time, a lot of real effort and time in creating bona fide relationships that I still have today that I enjoy. And because of that, I've been able to have very direct, frank conversations about issues that they don't really even consider or never have, which is UIM stacking or minimum limits. And they are just willing to learn now, and they're willing to learn because there's trust and there's real a genuine connection. And that's been the difference, and it has shown in the results. Now that effort, the effort at the relationships, needed to be backed up by the other thing that politicians require, which is money. And that's just the nature of American politics, period. And so other members of this group were able to then successfully go to other members and raise money so that these relationships that had been formed could be then backed up by like, oh, wow, okay, they're real. And this team effort, and it was very strategic in the sense that we had to ask for a lot of trust from our members to really go behind the money. And this is not something that we've always played defense, and nobody could believe for a second that we could be playing offense, but we did. And at the end of the day, they did a good thing for North Carolinians, and they know that, and they felt good about it. And a lot of them who normally would have just listened to any of the insurance lobbyists at the time felt proud to stand up against the insurance industry. So it's a big change down there, and I think there's going to be more opportunity for us to advance very pro-justice, pro-North Carolinian legislation that's going to help people ultimately down the road, and it's going to be and our attorneys are finally going to get some relief in North Carolina for some of the worst laws that have made it so hard for people to recover. And the folks now are listening to us, and they understand how these things affect people in a way, because now they can hear our stories. And, we've got cool client stories that they hear more and more. So I'm very hopeful for the future, and it's important for me to stay involved in this however way that I can be effective. And I think I'm very effective in this specific part of the space.
Yeah, it's a rare opportunity to be able to explain a complicated but incredibly important issue like UIM stacking, to somebody who really would have no idea why it
No,
would
they
be
don't want to know
important,
about it.
I mean, that's,
Right.
if you have that expertise and can get in front of the right people who will, and they will listen to you. That's a niche for sure.
It is, and they'll listen. Now they'll listen for a short period of time, but then the guys with the money have to come back in so that they keep
Right.
listening. So that's why it all kind of worked. That's why it all worked together. That's why the team was really
Right,
good.
right. So, so one of the other things that you and I talked about when we did our interview for the magazine was how you decided to go into the family business, because you didn't always know that you wanted to be an attorney, even though your father was an attorney when you were growing up.
Right. Yeah, no, and we had talked before. My first job was out at the airport. I loved airplanes. Loved airplanes. Got my pilot's license when I was the earliest I could, which was 17. And I thought that was probably, I love adventure. Wanted to be a pilot. Kind of glamorized that in my mind. And then, there's this, I think, satisfaction that I talked a little bit about earlier about watching people's lives getting changed. That I got that a little bit of experience in those Social Security disability hearings, but having to be also being in an environment where I got to watch my dad growing up doing this very work and having all of these stories, all because he's got so many good stories, and he's put one up. We put it all in a book. I think he's going to do another book, but he's got so many stories of all the people that he's helped. And so then of course it rubs off on you, and you can see how you can change, you can do something to make, not to make a difference, but you can use your mind to change somebody's life. And what a great gift that is to be able to share. So that was the part that drew me back in to feeling that I could potentially figure out a way to do both and to put the flying on hold for a little bit.
Right, right. I was really struck by one of your life experience stories that you shared about when you began to understand the power of storytelling when you were working as a waiter in a
Yeah.
restaurant. I shared this with my son the other day because he just got a job working as a waiter in a restaurant, and I was like,
Oh, good. Listen, I tell you, I mean, I learned more about people working in food and beverage, which I did all through college, than I think, anything you're ever going to learn about in law school. And it's the story, like, and it's the way that people respond to stories. It's powerful, or really the power of suggestion, truly. So, like, we were telling the story. I was at UNC Chapel Hill. I would work at this restaurant called Spartacus, which is a Greek restaurant. They had one in Durham. Well, they still have one in Durham, and they had one at Chapel Hill at the time and one in Cary. And I was working there as my senior year, and I would go up to the tables, like I'm just one specific group of 4 people, and I'd say to them, "Hey folks, you guys are in for such a treat tonight. Chef Antimos is one of the owners, and he's traveling to all the different restaurants, and tonight he's here in Chapel Hill, and he's made this amazing chef's mix grill. I think that there are still 4 or 5 left. I'll have to check. I may have sold one." And of course, everybody at the table immediately orders Chef Antimos' grill because, well, the thing is kind of funny is there really wasn't anybody named Chef Antimos. It wasn't, it was just a little story, but it was a narrative. And of course, the scarcity of the whole thing was that, no, I didn't sell. I mean, that made people nervous and they all wanted something. But they all liked the story because it was Chef Fontimos and he travels and he's here. But it was on the chef special board every night, and of course it was also the most expensive thing on the menu. So they enjoyed me there. I did a great job. They would tease me sometimes. The owners of Spartacus, they would look at a table and say, "I want her to order the musica, him to order the lamb chop," and my goal was to try to get that to happen and be their decision. So anyway, so that was the restaurant story. So.
wow, and so that experience sort of helped you learn how to tell stories when you were talking to juries as well.
Right. I mean, and just the people people follow the story and they want to learn, and the story is kind of how you can persuade, right? And what we're doing as being lawyers for our clients is we're persuading, and if we're trial lawyers, we're persuading people to believe our client's story. So it was a fascinating experience, and of course, loving it. So I hope your son has a good time.
Yeah, yeah, we'll see. He's just started out, but I was like, every job you have will teach you something. So hopefully
That's
he'll.
true. Yeah, well, that's good. And I've always been a believer. I've always found that folks that have worked for us at the firm, our biggest, number one players, have always had one thing in common. That's that they've always worked when the earliest they could, from 15. And that has been I was the same. And I think that really, you learn a lot about the value of money and business if you start early.
Yeah, and people are.
And people,
Yeah, no.
because this is a people business. I tell people, I tell people here, all problems are people, all solutions are people.
Oh, okay. All
Yeah,
solutions are people. All right.
they are. And in this business, they are.
I'll use that on my son. Maybe
Yeah, see
when he comes
make him
home from the
scratch his head a
restaurant
little bit.
frustrated, I'll see if that works.
Okay, give it a shot.
So, but you eventually went into the family business and became a partner with your dad, but you kept the aviation, the being a pilot, that part of your first passion alive as well.
Yes, I did. And I continued on with my training, and I got my commercial license, and now, it's a big part of my life. I use it for work. I use it to travel. I use it to adventure and to get kind of use my mind for something. And the thing about it is, in like the cases that I work on now, Amber, like some of them will take 7 years to completion, from inception to the end. The really complex, long cases, the different types of mass torts, those take so long. And for me, with the flying, I can have one day, I can plan the flight, follow the weather, I can do all the little stuff, I can get in the airplane, I can take off, land it, and then I can have accomplished this whole amazingly complex loop of things, and I can do it all in one day. And for me, that is satisfying, because in most of my job, I
Right.
can't. I really can't. So that's part of it for me. It really is.
Right. And it also helps you or enables you to do stuff like be involved in the airlift operation that you
Yes,
did in
yes.
Western North Carolina. Tell me about that.
Sure, I've been a member of Operation Airdrop for a couple years now, and so we started off in some of the hurricanes back that had hit the flooding in, about 4 years ago in North Carolina. And so what it is this organization is a civilian air fleet. Basically, they have former military guys have ways to reach out to people that have airplanes and have time. And so usually it's a hurricane or a major disaster strikes, there's usually a period of time, like maybe about a week or so, or a couple of days, especially within Western North Carolina, that they can't get a federal response or the state's response. People could be stuck. So they activate Operation Airdrop, and we go in and we muster supplies. In this case, for Western North Carolina, it was in Concord. So we all flew into Concord. They had volunteers. You would tell them how much weight you would need. I needed 800 pounds. That's how much the plane could carry safely. And then the volunteers would go load up the plane, fully loaded up, and then we would take off into little remote mountain airports that were able then to distribute the supplies out to a lot of the people that were stuck. And we ran flights for several days during that week, and was able to really help a lot of folks in Ashe County, because that was one of the ones that had been stuck. And that was when I was really blown away at kind of what had happened. And I've talked to people, it's still happening, really. And my fear of how they're going to recover. But part of that was being able to use this civilian fleet. It was cool to me. It's like, I don't know if you've seen the movie Dunkirk, when they needed to rescue the British Army, and they activated the civilian fleet of boats, and of all of England came down to help them out. And it's like a little concept like that. It's just everybody's on standby to go help out folks that need and have the resources to do so. So it's pretty cool.
Wow. Yeah, that's amazing to think that think hanging out at the airport in Kinston led to a lifelong.
Yeah, well, Kinston's a lot of good things come. A lot of good people come from Kinston. A lot of good things come from Kinston.
Sure, absolutely, absolutely. Well, this has been terrific. Thank you so much for hanging out and being on my
Awesome.
podcast today.
Yeah, I enjoyed it.
All right.
Thank you, Amber.
Well, I hope you have a terrific holiday, Ben.
You too. We'll
And
see you guys
thanks
then.
everyone for listening. Please be on the lookout for the year-end edition of Trial Briefs, which will be showing up in your mailboxes soon and is online now at ncaj.com/trialbriefs. And you can read my story on Ben and a whole lot more.